I have a lot of controllers, but which one's the best? And yes, I'm counting handhelds because, I wanted to have more controllers. What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be ranking all my controllers, and I guess let's just get to it. Alright, so in last place, I have this plug-and-play Coleco controller that, just plugs in with like component cords, but it is not good. This controller is so cheap and like plastic. It's just light and plasticky, and when you use this controller, it's not that good. Like the buttons are not in a good place, and the D-pad is so weird. Like this is the worst controller I've probably ever used. It's so light and plasticky and like cheap. It's not that good. Next up, we have this Chinese ripoff of an N64 controller. Now this thing, the buttons feel good. Like they're clicky. The start button's nice. The triggers are okay. They're not too bad. But the thing that I really hate about this controller is the joystick. This joystick is not good. It's like stiff. I mean, it feels fine when you move it around, but like when you're playing a game, it's like you're trying to move forward and it's not doing what it's supposed to do. The D-pad is horrible. This thing it gets stuck this way, and then it's like not very clicky. It's just not good. Next up, we have the Sega Genesis controller. Now, this controller, it's not bad. It's just not like the greatest form factor, although it is very reliable. It's a very good controller. It's just like if you're trying to hold down different buttons and to do different things, it's like you can't hold A and press B very easily. Otherwise, you gotta like move your thumb. And then if you're trying to press A and C at the same time, oh man, you gotta do this. Like, what in the world? Like, these buttons are not in a very good placement. But for the first Sega controller, it is pretty good. Next up, we have the Game Boy. Now, I am including handhelds in this, but the Game Boy, it is really nice. It's just, the thing is, you're kind of holding a brick. Like, the buttons all feel really good, but then your hands, like, my gigantic hands do not know where to put themselves other than, like, my thumb. Like, where do I put my other fingers? Like, there's no grips or anything to hold this. It's like, this was made for, like, little kids' hands. And it's not bad, it's just like your hands can kind of cramp up after a while playing this, and select and start don't feel like the greatest. Next up, I have the NES controller. Now, the NES controller is a great controller, don't get me wrong, but you can't play that many things with it realistically. Like if you played this on a Switch, like the new Switch version, and then you like try to play like Mario or something, there's only 2 buttons. And that's fine for an NES game, but not really for any new games. Now, it also doesn't have the greatest form factor. There's not really that many buttons. Of course, it's the first Nintendo controller. But the Select and Start do feel much better than the Game Boy. And the D-pad, like, dude, Nintendo has the, like, greatest D-pads ever. Ignore the Pro Controller. All the buttons feel really nice. It's just after holding this for a while, your hands can kind of cramp up. But just don't play video games for 5 hours straight. It could never be me. Next up, I have the, this is a PowerA Switch like Pro controller, but it's like, off-brand. The buttons feel okay, like they feel nice. The D-pad's not too bad. All the buttons are clicky. I would say the control, what's it called? The triggers and the bumpers don't feel like the greatest, but it's not too bad. You can tell it's a little bit cheap, and these clicky buttons do not work on the Switch, I swear. Like, I don't know, this controller can't be mapped. What is this button? This controller cannot be mapped in the Switch. These are the most clicky and loud back buttons I've ever heard. Like, these do not need to be here. You can't use those on a Switch. But, it's not too bad. Next up, I have the Nintendo Zapper gun controller. Now, having a gun as a controller is super awesome. But, this thing doesn't work, like, the greatest, since you have to have, like, a tube TV to be able to use it. And this is the loudest, trigger I have ever heard. And it's just, it doesn't work for that many games. Like, having a gun as a controller is cool. Like, imagine playing this in Call of Duty, but, like, other than that, you're not gonna play Mario with a gun. Like, it's not the greatest controller ever for that many games. But it is really nice for Becca and stuff like that, so, yeah. Next up, I have Joy-Cons. Now, Joy-Cons aren't exactly the greatest controller. They're okay. the joysticks are so short. Like, obviously, them being small and portable is good because they have to go on the Switch's screen. But imagine using the right Joy-Con by itself without a grip and using these little buttons. Like my thumb, this is the most uncomfortable controller I have ever seen in my entire life. Now, they're not horrible playing them like this. Like, the buttons are small and there's no D-pad, so obviously it's because you have to use the controller like this to be able to mimic these buttons. Like, the controller feels nice. Like, these triggers feel good because they're like very clicky. They'd be good for Call of Duty, but they're not the greatest. Now, it does improve when you put them inside this thing because it gives it a little bit more grip and you don't feel like you're going to get carpal tunnel using this controller. But the joysticks are so short that there's no travel time. Like, you move it a 0.00 like inch and then they hit the edge. Like, there's no like sensitivity at all. Like, it's just literally you're playing with a D-pad at this point. So the Joy-Cons aren't like necessarily bad, they're just not necessarily great either and would not work for other consoles very much at all. Next up, I have the Sony PS2 controller. Now, I do not have that much experience with PlayStation, and this controller, it's nice. I'd say a PS5 or like PS4 controller would feel like way better. It's not bad, it's just I like other controllers more, and I don't understand these triggers. Like, these triggers, these are not even triggers, these are just buttons on the top. Although, I mean, like, how do your thumbs not hit each other when you play this game? Like, my thumbs, if I'm pushing forward on a joystick, my thumb will naturally, after a while, would just move up to, like, the pad of my thumb, and my thumbs would hit each other. Maybe I'm just an Xbox biased, but, like, I don't necessarily like this controller that much. I don't know. Next up, I have the OG N64 controller. Now, you're probably thinking, how did this get above a PS2 controller? It's because I'm biased towards N64, but also because, this is a good controller. Like, I mean, it's not like, you know, the greatest, but, I mean, it works for what it is, and N64 games are really good. So, I mean, I like N64. Like, all the buttons are really clicky, everything works. The joystick isn't, like, you know, the greatest, I'm gonna be honest, but the D-pad and all the buttons and stuff, and just the goofiness of this controller makes up for it. Like, what is this controller, though? Next up, I have the orange version of the original N64 controller. Now, this is official Nintendo, so this is not a Chinese version. It's basically the exact same controller but orange, so it gets a little bit more points there. It's nice, it's see-through, it's cool to see like the board of the controller and stuff, so yeah. Next up, I have this neon green and black 360 controller, and my dad actually put the green and like stuff in here. I think it was like originally all black maybe, but he also put back buttons on here because you have to like take the controller apart and rewire like the back buttons or whatever and put them in. But it's a good controller, you know. 360 controller is probably one of my favorite controllers ever. And look, the thumbs don't hit each other. The D-pad on the 360 controller though isn't like the greatest, but because of nostalgia and the triggers and bumpers are really good, so yeah. Next up, I have another 360 controller, the Army Green. Now, one thing I do want to say about 360 controllers is the battery pack. Why does Xbox insist on you using batteries? This is stupid. There's no, like, why doesn't it have an internal battery? And, like, it makes it a little bit more annoying to hold because then my fingers have to go down here and not, like, on the controller like a new Xbox controller. It just makes it so dumb. Like, just put a battery in the dang controller. Like, why? Why? Next up, I have the Game Boy Advance. Now, okay, you're probably thinking, how did this get above all those other controllers? It's because it's got a screen connected to it, and these buttons are really nice. It's got bumpers. I mean, it's not the best form factor, but like, it's portable. Like, it's so cool. I really like the Game Boy, and I really like this Legend of Zelda case that me and my dad put on here. One thing that would be cool is to replace the charging adapter with a replace the charging adapter with a USB-C, so you can charge this with like a Switch charger or anything really. Everything feels really nice, and it's just a great controller. Next up, we got the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Now, This one is, this joystick's broken because it kind of fell off the couch and went pop right onto the joystick. But it is a good controller nonetheless. We'll just pretend that it's not broken. The Switch controller, it's a really good controller. It's like one of the most comfortable ones I've used. Now, the D-pad is not bad. I don't think it's really that bad. It's just a lot of people think it's really bad. The buttons aren't as clicky as they could, but at least they're quiet. So when you're using this controller, unlike an Xbox controller, you're not going to be making a ton of noise trying to play Call of Duty, like, or well, you can't play Call of Duty on the Switch, but this does have like sort of mouse click triggers. Like they're not adaptive, or like they don't have much travel. And I mean, the controller feels really nice. It's not bad. Next up, I have this Halo Edition Xbox 360 controller, just because it has 4 back buttons that my dad put on there. And also, this Halo controller looks so cool. The only thing is it's drifting, but we'll just ignore that also. I honestly think that Xbox 360 D-pad's better than a Pro Controller one. Great controller. Next up, I have the Super Nintendo, sort of like, dog bone controller. I think the Super Nintendo controller is the 2D controller, other than maybe like an 8-bit do, basically version of this with like, joysticks and more triggers and everything. This is the best 2D games controller. Like, the D-pad's great, start and select are great, it has buttons, I mean, everything about, at first I was like, okay, I won't like this controller as much as the NES controller, and then I played with it again after like a long time, and I was like, this is such a good controller. I love this. This controller feels so good for some reason. I don't know why. I just really love this controller. Next up, I have my red Xbox 360 controller. Now, this is probably like my official ranking of where the 360 controller would be. I just kind of put the other ones in there randomly based on color. This is like my favorite Xbox 360 controller because red is my favorite color. But it doesn't have any back buttons because I don't really care about back buttons that much. I just love the 360 controller. It's just a great controller. Like, all the buttons feel really nice. You can never really go wrong with it other than the stupid battery pack. Other than that, it's not too bad. It's really nice form factor and everything, Next up, I have my dad's green, like kind of like army green, different colored like Xbox One X controller. This controller just looks so cool. And they kind of fixed the problem with the battery pack being in the back, kind of. Now it got a cover and it's like in there. It's better than the 360 controller, battery pack wise. And we have a actual like battery thing that should already be in the stupid controller. Why do they make you pay extra to put a battery in there when what is the point, Xbox? What's the point, Microsoft? Do you really want us to pay more money for a freaking battery inside our controller? I'm gonna go buy a PS5 controller. I'm gonna do it. If you don't put a battery pack inside of the next controller when you release the next Xbox, I'm buying a PS5 controller. It's just so annoying. Like, why do I have to put batteries in here or like charge the controller? Get an extra battery charger thing. But anyway, the actual controller, this is like the best feeling controller I have ever used. This is like top tier, best controller. I mean, that's just in my opinion. Maybe the PS5 controller is better. I don't have one. I should probably get one just to try it, compare the two controllers. This controller just feels really nice, especially with the grip and everything. It just feels, a lot nicer than a lot of controllers. Next up, we got the Steam Deck. Now, the Steam Deck is interesting because it has trackpads. This thing is essentially a mobile computer. I mean, it's better than a laptop. Not really. Honestly, I think computers are better a little bit because you can do a lot more. But for what it is, this controller, I mean, it just feels really nice. It's got like it's got these kind of triggers. I don't know what they're called. I can't remember. But everything about the controller feels really nice. It's got trackpads, which is really cool. And the D-pad's in a spot where you can play 2D games and 3D games like really well. Everything about this controller, or really handheld, is really nice and it feels really good. Now, next up, we have keyboard and mouse. Now, keyboard and mouse isn't a controller, but I decided to put it on here just so you would know what my feeling is on keyboard and mouse. Now, I prefer controller for most games, but some games, a lot of games, don't let you use a controller. And having a mouse just gives you a lot more like accessibility, and with a keyboard, you can have so many more buttons. Like, having the actual keyboard, I mean, like, my hands kind of cramp up using this, but it's not bad after a while. I feel like I just need to get used to it. Playing on a keyboard, I've gotten more used to playing on a keyboard and mouse lately, but I don't know, keyboard and mouse, like, it's not bad. I don't know how people press shift and control with their pinky. I feel like mechanical keyboards would be a little bit easier, maybe. Maybe my pinky's just weak. I don't know. I mean, keyboard and mouse, pretty good. Alright, next up, I got the 8BitDo, hold on, I gotta get the stand. It's kind of plugged in. Just move the camera a bit. 8BitDo, okay, Famicom 40th Anniversary Special Edition 8BitDo controller. Now, this thing is a beast of a controller. You can program it with, like, turbo, and, like, it has programmable back buttons. It has really good triggers. I feel like on the Switch they're not as good. Just really, it doesn't notice that it's like adaptive. Whenever you push it at all, it thinks it's like a pro controller most of the time. So it thinks you're just clicking the joystick. But other than that, if you can get it to work, I don't really know. The D-pad is really great. The buttons all feel really good. The joysticks feel nice. They have they're Hall effect, so they won't drift. Hopefully. I hope they don't. The metal, I don't necessarily like the metal when I'm playing. They look good, but they don't feel that great. So I put caps on because I like rubber more. Just gives you more grip. The buttons all feel really good. Obviously, this is the Switch edition. So they're all like, you know, Switch Pro Controller in like orientation of the Switch Pro Controller. But it comes with a stand, so with a light. This is like the coolest controller I have. Now, in first place, my favorite and best controller is the Xbox Series X or S controller. This controller, I mean, I put the green one lower just because I like red more, and this is my favorite controller. I just put it there just because. This is like, I love the Xbox controller. I don't know why I love it so much. It's just, like, I grew up with 360, and then this is like even better, and I play with this on PC. It just feels so good, although it is loud. So you'll be cranking 90s in Fortnite and you'll just hear, yeah, it's kind of loud. The D-pad isn't like the greatest, but I mean, I'm biased towards the Xbox controller. It feels so nice. It's just the most comfortable controller. I could use this till I die and my hands would never cramp up. Like, it's just the most comfortable feeling controller. Now, I might get a PS5 controller, and maybe I'll do a review of that versus this, and we'll see what I like better. I'll have to use it, but I mean, yeah, that's basically it for my ranking of all my controllers. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you later.